thought that, yeah, exactly. So the idea is to do everything within the shipping container.
First of all, welcome everyone, and I hope you're all doing great. My name is Maeva, and I'm a student specializing in urban planning.
My name is Wanda, and I'm a student studying business technology management. And we're doing the plastics and fashion webinar. We're both general coordinators at CP3. Sarah is also here from CP3, and she'll be helping moderate and facilitate some questions.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of plastics and fashion, I will do a land acknowledgement and briefly talk about CP3's mission. We would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kenyan Kehaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Jojage or Montreal is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples, and we respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. So Wanda and I are part of CP3, or better known as the Concordia Precious Plastic Project. So our mission is pretty simple. We aim to reduce plastic waste at Concordia by repurposing it into new recycled items for the community. So if ever you're interested, you can also follow us on social media and check out our website, as you can see here on the screen. So in terms of the presentation scope, we'll start this event with an introduction to synthetic fibers, and then we'll dive into the world of polyester and the environmental impacts. Then it will be followed by tips on actions that you can do for the future. And finally, we'll discover some of the positives of plastic when it comes to extreme fibers. So Wanda, what do we know about synthetic fibers?
So what do all of these images have in common? All of them have, as part of their composition, plastics, whether it is through beads or through the actual material that's being used. Synthetic fibers are man-made, inorganic, produced fibers. So these are derived from fossil fuels and petrochemicals. They are much faster to produce than their organic counterparts, such as wool or cotton. And as a result of their chemical production, they are much more environmentally harmful. But we're now in 2021, so where did this actually start?
So it all started with artificial fibers in the 19th century through chemical experiments between alcohol and acid. So this created repeating molecular structures that form long, stable, and strong polymer fibers. At the same time, polyester and polyamides were created by the DuPont Fiber Company, which were the headquarters of the synthetic textile innovation in the 20th century. So by the 1930s, plastics had made their appearance in fashion with the rise of polyester and polyamides. So just to see the difference between the two, polyester is made with non-renewable sources of fossil fuels like petroleum. And as you can see here on the screen, its composition and texture are rougher than polyamides, and they're hydrophobic, meaning that it repels water. While polyamides, the same goes to its creation. It's made from petroleum and chemicals as well. And when we talk about performance and composition, polyamides is a lot more flexible and comfortable. As you can see here, the texture is a lot more different than polyester since it's a lot softer. And a good example of this is nylon, which I will talk about later. So going back to the 1930s, well, this era marked the return of ultra-feminine dresses and plastic-based fabrics such as rayon, which were used to imitate silk and provide durability and freedom of movement. You can also see that plastic sequins also gained popularity for adding an extra sparkle and glamour for evening dresses. But in the end, it was nylon that became the most popular material as the DuPont Fiber Company decided to concentrate on polyamides. So nylon was the first known fully synthetic fiber, which was made from petrochemicals. And then the DuPont Fiber Company launched nylon stockings, which were proved to be a success. Let's now fast forward to the 1970s, where polyester was rising to dominate the fashion industry. Although polyester had been present since the 1930s, it only became widely used in the 1970s. So, despite enduring bad press from the fashion industry for being cheap and uncomfortable, the fabric revolutionized as being fashion's favorite material. So, polyester is known to be wrinkle-free, non-stretching, and quick-drying, so its properties catered for a generation who wanted to be free of the ironing board and laundry chores. It also lacked absorbance as fiber stops clothing from sticking to the body when it's wet. And the rest is history. Today, many of our clothes are made with synthetic fibers, which are basically plastic.
So, as Maeva said, in the 1970s, polyester became mass adopted. In this statistic report, we look at the global production of polyester fibers around the world in 1,000 metric tons. And we can see that from 1975 up until 2017, the production level grew close to 16 times its value. This was due to a variety of factors, them being first, the increase in production has change in consumer behavior impacted the production of polyester. And also, when we look at the values from 1990 up until 2017, this was when production really picked up as a result of globalization, producing the synthetic fibers overseas. And it's also important to note that polyester can be done through the recycling of PET bottles. So as trends in fashion now shift towards a more sustainable approach, it becomes a good option. When we look a bit further into this industry research done by Plastics Insight in 2016, the global consumption of fibers remain with polyester taking more than half of the market share, accounting for 55% of the global consumption for fibers. Cotton comes as a second with 27%, and all other fibers, synthetic and organic, compete for the remainder market share. So what this tells us is that polyester still plays a big role in the fashion industry. This fiber that has Maeva explained to us, it is made fundamentally of plastics. Let's look a bit into how is polyester actually made. The first process is a chemical process called condensation polymerization, which is when the acid, the alcohol, and the fossil fuels will be combined to create the pellets that we see to the right. The second step is spinning. So these raw materials will be taken. They will be then spun through an extruder machine that is going to heat up. This is the extruder machine. It's going to heat up. This fiber would then be placed into a cylinder so we can loosely dry using the air. Then the third step is drawing. This is the step that we now see, which basically involves heating up the material again, stretching it to about 5 times its size, which is going to reduce the width, spin it, and we'll have the polyester yarn that we see today. So this is how it is done using raw materials, basically using raw plastic to manufacture polyester. But how does it work when we're talking about recycled polyester, Maeva?
That's an interesting question. Recycled polyester, or rPET, has been developed using clear plastic water bottles. So for those who didn't know, PET's actual name is polyethylene terephthalate, and it's used in most plastic containers. So you can see here that it's made out of water bottles and microwavable food trays, and it's also 100% recyclable. So the process starts with PET bottles arriving at the facility, and then they are sorted, washed, and the labels are manually or machine removed. Then they are shredded into tiny pieces. And this is similar to how we want to recycle at Concordia. So in terms of the bottle caps, well, they're all made of HDPE plastic, so those are separated. Then the PET shreds are separated by colors through a machine that specializes in sorting and put into an extruder machine. This machine will heat up the shreds and extrude it into large fibers similar to the raw polyester process. This yarn is then funneled, heated again, and stretched to increase the yarns that will then be spun into the yarn we are familiar with. These can then be cut and sewn to make clothing. So why go for recycled polyester? Well, it's more of a sustainable option than its counterpart, but it does maintain the usual characteristics that made polyester popular and recognizable. So instead of using new materials to craft the fabric, recycled polyester makes use of existing plastic. But what other material can also be made of recycled fibers?
That's a good question. And nylon is one of these materials. So if we look at this product collection called Nylon, they were using primarily recycled nylon, which can be found such as fishnets. These can be recycled and turned into synthetic fibers that would then be able to be turned into products such as this bag or the dress. Nylon as a whole is a fiber that is resistant to sunlight, to mold, it is quick to dry, and many companies are now vouching to make recycled nylon one of their top options when it comes to making their products. The other synthetic fiber would like to highlight is acrylic. Acrylic is the hardest one to spot because it's very, very similar to its organic counterpart. It's quite similar to wool or cotton sweaters. So what we do recommend is when you're shopping for clothing online, if you want to avoid purchasing synthetic fibers, to just take a look at the material description, as acrylic is indeed a synthetic fiber. Another one is Lycra. We all know Lycra, which also goes by elastane or spandex. It's a material that does not react badly to chlorine. It's very commonly used for sports, and of course, the 80s. It was a sensation. That was when Lycra, elastane, or spandex, whatever name is being used, really picked up speed because it enables a lot of freedom of movement. We still see it today. Every time we go to a throwback, there will always be someone wearing a Lycra top. Another thing that isn't a synthetic fiber, but is very common in the fashion industry is polyurethane. So this is one of the materials used to create a fake or faux leather. And it's also used for bags with the iridescent feature. And it is quite harmful for the environment, but more harmful than polyurethane, it's its second option for fake leather, which is PVC or vinyl. This material is the most harmful plastics found in fashion because there isn't a safe way of producing or disposing. So it leaches chemicals throughout its entire production and during the disposal process. It is known as latex, and it is not recommended to be used for children or in heat circumstances because, like I mentioned, the chemicals used to produce are quite harmful to the human life, animal life, and the environment. Why we keep producing it? Well, we continue to produce these materials because they're cheaper than the counterparts, and because as fashion evolves, our interests and the portrayals and editorials change. So the only way to get this latex apparel that we see here in the Burberry collection is through indeed using latex. So we have given quite a lot of information and we want to welcome your questions in the middle. So we're launching now a poll and we're also starting a question period before we move on to the second part of the webinar. Does anyone have any questions? Maybe after the poll, I realized I'd launched the poll and asked for questions at the same time. So just anytime. And if you don't want to unmute yourself, feel free to write it in the chat.
So we have a question from the chat that I'll read out to our two speakers. And that is clothing made from PET material easier to recycle or repurpose after the clothing item's lifetime is over?
This is a good question. So the answer to this question is it really depends because if you take a clothing tag you will realize that a lot of the times this clothing is made with, let's say, 96% polyester, 2% elastine. So the PET material that it's made, it's simply a thread. And this thread is then combined with other materials whenever they're making the clothing. So I wouldn't say that once the material is done, it is recycled again. I'm not sure if it can be recycled, but my understanding is that the PET bottles is used to create the fiber. And once the fiber in the garment is produced, the only way to recycle would be if you upcycle and turn it into a different clothing material, into a different piece.
That makes a lot of sense. People are also commenting that they're really enjoying so far. There's a couple other questions. I think maybe if we launch the results of the poll, that might also stir up some questions before I keep going.
Yes, I'm going to end the poll now and launch the results. Is everyone able to see the poll?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, awesome.
And I saw the question about viscose. So viscose is kind of like a hybrid fabric. It's semi-synthetic. So Maeva spoke to us about rayon, and viscose is from the family of rayon.
Okay, so these are amazing questions, and the results of the poll, I can tell that everyone did well. So we'll now end this short Q&A to dive deeper into the environmental impacts of plastics in fashion, but I will definitely answer the rest of the questions towards the end, so you can keep asking questions in the chat as well. But first, let's talk about fast fashion. So there are many companies that are known to be fast fashion brands, such as H&M, Zara, and Topshop. But when did this idea of fast fashion start? So in the US during the late 1980s, the American society switched to being a product-driven to manufacture-driven. Therefore, we end up with overconsumption and 52 fashion seasons a year. Also, the notion of single-use clothing started dominating, which avoided repetitions. The term fast fashion was then coined in the 2000s by the New York Times to describe Zara's mission to take only 15 days for a garment to go from design stage to being sold in stores. So it did have a high impact in terms of synthetic fibers, as fast fashion makes use of cheap textiles. So there are several tragedies linked to developing countries where most of the production of fast fashion is happening. So a famous one being the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013 in Bangladesh. Also, many human rights have been neglected, from the health of laborers to labor costs. So as I mentioned earlier, anything done through production has massive environmental impact. So here are a few numbers from the UN Environment Programme to give an idea. The tiny fibers that make up our clothing have led to 1.4 million trillion plastic fibers in the ocean, and it's also responsible for 20% of global wastewater. Finally, water treatment plants let up to 40% of microfibers they receive into lakes, rivers, and the ocean due to their small size. So this leads us to the manufacturing process. So fabrics and textiles also have important environmental impacts. Getting from fiber to cloth, bleaching, dyeing, and finishing uses more energy and water and causes yet more pollution. So dyeing alone can account for most of the water used in producing a garment. Unfixed dye then often washes out of garments and can end up coloring the rivers. As we can see here on the screen, the water has been tainted by the dye. Furthermore, dye fixatives, often heavy metals, also end up in sewers and then rivers. Hence, the production of fast fashion also affects those who work in factories. Laborers are affected by the chemicals used to produce cheap fabrics made into t-shirts, and the same goes to those who live around the factories, as its chemicals pollute the air continuously. The constant speed and demand mean more impact on other environmental areas, such as biodiversity and soil quality. It also means more clothes are disposed of by consumers, which creates massive textile waste. For instance, in Australia alone, more than 500 million kilograms of unwanted clothing end up in landfill every year.
So on the note of clothing that ends up in landfill, we want to delve a bit into the socioeconomic impacts of fast fashion clothing disposal. It is very common in countries, let's say the United States, to ship its clothing as a donation to other countries. This has a tremendous impact, not just in the storage of the clothing, but it decreases the innovative ideas from local fashion designers because it reduces the incentive for them to create their own collections when their country is already quite overwhelmed with the receival of these materials. They come quite frequently. They also usually come via boat, which has a tremendous environmental impact for the transportation. The clothes that are not purchased are sometimes also thrown away. So in a way, this is moving the problem from one country to another to then be disposed in this other country. Considering how complex and oftentimes inefficient the waste disposal process actually is, the clothing will end up in a landfill or in a waste incineration. When clothing go into landfill, there is something called microfibers. Microfibers happen through the washing, but also through the disposing, and they are a category of microplastics. These are plastic pieces that are smaller than 5 millimeters, and they have been found in our water supply systems, in the soil, in carrots, and even in human placenta. We have a very interesting article up on the website that was written about microplastics in human placenta that we do recommend you to check it out if you're interested. So what are actually, we all know that there are microplastics in fashion, right? We all know glitter. It gets everywhere, it stays everywhere, and it's impossible to get rid of. It's very, very, very difficult to be able to remove glitter from the soil, from the waste stream, from the water, and other forms of microplastics that have been created intentionally for the fashion industry are beads. Of course, that a garment that is made of beads is recommended to be washed by hand to preserve the garment and also to ensure that the beads are not going to go through the washing cycle, sorry. But in regards to the washing cycle, what actually happens when we wash synthetic clothes?
Surprisingly, laundry plays a big role in the environmental impacts of plastics in fashion. So it's really hard to pin down the exact amount of plastic pollution per load of laundry because there are so many variables that may contribute to fibers shedding or not. As mentioned earlier, synthetic fibers make up a good share of microplastics in the ocean. Another statistic has shown that one washing load of clothes could be shedding up to 17 million tiny fibers. To avoid shedding additional sources of plastic and to adopt a more environmentally friendly action, I will be providing a quick laundry guide which will be of help for your future washes. First up, we have a microplastics filter. So we have the Guppy Friend. If you have synthetic clothes, the Guppy Friend bag is a good way to stop most of these fibers from going down the drain. It's a mesh bag that you place your clothes into before washing, and it filters out any microfibers that are released during washing. Another alternative is the Coral Ball, and it is a laundry ball which collects microfibers. Inspired by coral filters in the ocean, the ball prevents microfibers to break off from clothes. So all you have to do is to simply toss it in your washer, and it collects the microfibers into fuzz we can see, and we can dispose of them properly. My second tip is to wash your clothes less. Yes, it may come as a surprise for many of you, but this tip is the simplest way to reduce microplastics in the laundry. And I can say that you could go up to 2 to 3 times when wearing a clothing item before washing it. So less washing, more saving. And as a result, our clothes will last longer and it will reduce CO2 emissions as well. So this also includes using the tumble drying, and if possible, choose to dry your clothes with the air with a drying rack. So you can avoid having clothes being shrinked or having it being enlarged. But if you absolutely need to use it, avoid putting it too fast since the risk of plastics being shredded is higher. And finally, we have the detergent. So there are numerous ways to reduce your use of plastic. So you can buy your laundry detergent in bulk in a reusable container to reduce plastic waste from laundry detergent jugs. And you can also try to create your own detergent. And most ingredients can be found at the grocery store, and there are many DIY tutorials online which can assist you. But what else can you do to reduce your impact? So first off, we have buying from B Corps. As defined from the official B Corporation website, these are certified businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. In other words, being a B Corp is proof that a company acts in ways that benefit society compared to a traditional shareholder-centered corporation where it's the opposite. A good example would be California-based company Patagonia. Canadian fashion brands that are also officially certified B Corp are Poppy Barley, Grey Rock Clothing Company, and Frank & Oak. A third tip would be to buy organic. So you can avoid polyester by buying organic fabrics instead. A few examples include cotton, hemp, and linen. Other options can also be from reused, upcycled, and recycled materials. And finally, the last two come in hand. So you have thrift shopping, which you can buy from secondhand and charity shops. And when it comes to thrift shopping, some advice I would give is to choose well to buy less. There are lots of pre-loved garments which show few signs of wear and tear that have been recycled in secondhand stores. So by choosing well, you're helping to avoid the unsustainable overproduction of fibers at a cost to the environment and the world's most vulnerable people. You can also trade or give away your clothes to other people. That's the second option. For instance, Buns.com is a battering community that posts their goods for trade online and what would they like to trade for. So this is commonly used via the Facebook group Buns Trading Around Montreal, and there are plenty other cities that have this type of trading clothes business. So that being said, not all synthetic fibers are bad, right, Wanda?
Yes, so some fibers can actually be used for extreme events. And also, it's important to note that there's a lot of research that goes into creating new fibers. The nylon that we saw in the 1970s, it's not the same nylon material that we might see today. This is because companies are constantly investing into developing new chemical processes and developing new fibers and new materials to supply for the current demand. So here we would talk a bit about the usage of synthetic fibers to go through extreme environmental circumstances. The first one that we're going to look to is we'll, of course, remember the Apollo 11 mission. For anyone here that is interested in space, the suit that was used was actually counted with 21 different layers of synthetic fibers. Out of these, 20 was produced by DuPont, the company that invented fibers that Maeva mentioned to us a while back. The other one is neoprene. So neoprene is a form of polychloroprene, and this is a waterproof synthetic rubber. It's commonly used for scuba, wetsuits, sportwears. It was invented as a substitute to natural rubber back in the 30s, and it has gone through many different iterations to get into this scuba pro suit that we see today. Another option is a mixture of Kevlar and Nomex. These are two fibers that we'll talk about shortly. But first, I just want to show you this video from the testing mannequin of this fiber combination. It is a fire retardant fiber, and this mannequin is called Thermoman, and he has 122 different sensors, which enables for the improved research and development of new fibers. The researcher can actually spot where did it go through burn injury, how long was the exposure for, and create a suit that will protect those who are fighting against climate change in a way, because we have seen an increase of forest fires, and we know the importance that it is to prevent and to address this issue. And the best material in the market is actually Nomex. So Nomex is used for race car suits. It's a very resistant material, and it is used for these these dangerous activities because, sorry, there was something wrong with my transition. But Nomex is used for this environment because it is extremely fire retardant. A Nomex suit can last up until 5 years, which, considering the circumstances that it's being exposed, it's quite a lot. Another material is Kevlar. So Kevlar is used alongside Nomex to make the suit that we saw that was burning, and Kevlar was also included into the Apollo 11 suit. It can aid on consumer products by making it more durable, making it stronger, and it also can adapt to whatever the needs might be. Kevlar is very much so used in a chemical environment and in an industrial setting to prevent from cuts and to prevent to chemical exposure of the users. So that being said, we hope that we were able to provide you with a brief overview of the world of plastics and fiber, of plastics and fashion. There's quite a lot to go about it, and this is why we condensed into this layout. We will be sending out a feedback form afterwards, and we hope to host another session that we can go into more details about these topics. So we welcome your feedback, and we thank for the questions. We will now answer all of them.
Okay, so I'll start. I'll go from the top, and maybe they'll be mixed mash, but hopefully everyone's questions will be answered. So maybe the first one to answer it is, what material is clothing the most recyclable? So in terms of all the ones that you mentioned, what's maybe the most environmentally friendly that we should, when we see it, maybe grab it right away so we know that it's good?
Organic materials. So it's always, like Maeva said, I'm going back to that slide, give a preference to organic materials. There are many companies and many textile recycling initiatives that are able to recycle the material after it's been donated to the proper place.
I would like to add also that most of them are made without harmful chemicals, and it doesn't destroy the ecosystem as well. And I think a good majority are biodegradable as well, so they're not that harmful. So buying organic is definitely the way to go if you really want to avoid synthetic fibers.
That's great. With that, there's a question of how to maybe manage conversations with companies that are saying that they're using recycled plastic or saying that they're using sustainable products, but it might be they're using unclean items in the process. So how do you go about that in terms of when you're buying and talking to companies directly?
That's a good question. Just before, I just want to rectify something that I answered on the previous question about viscose. So viscose is a material that can also be considered organic. It will burn similar to cotton, and it's part of regenerated cellulose, not plastic. So thank you to the person who messaged me in private and explained that. I really appreciate it. About facilitating conversations with companies, I think the most important thing to remember is that what drives for-profit companies are profit, right? So where we put our money and where we make our purchases make a huge impact into how companies will behave. We are living in a time where there's a lot of climate change denial, but there's also a lot of push for sustainability. And I think the fact that we saw a product collection completely out of recycled nylon shows that we are evolving, like our consumer consciousness is evolving, and facilitating this conversation would really depend on what level do you have in the company. If you're a worker in the company, perhaps this is something that can be brought up to your product team. If you are someone who is interested in fashion, looking into sustainable alternatives. Maeva, would you like to add anything?
No, it's pretty much what I had in mind as well. I mean, I don't have much to add, to be honest.
I will just preface before we continue that I've added some links to either join our team or our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel, which is where this recording will be posted. So if you have to go, by all means, thank you for coming. And you can follow up on all these question periods a little bit later on through our YouTube channel. So the next question is, how do you go about it if you're getting clothes done by a seamstress? How would you select maybe the most recycled plastic or material fabric?
Yes, so whenever you're having your clothes done, I'm assuming at some point you or your seamstress will have to go and purchase the material. So make sure that whenever you go to buy this material, you prioritize organic items like the ones that we see on the screen. Someone also wrote about bamboo. Bamboo is also a good alternative. So you would really be buying you would be buying them the proper raw material in the first place.
Great answer. Thank you. I'm just trying to read at the same time. The next question is in terms of ensuring that you're using the cleanliness of the material source that you have and any regulations that maybe the material supplier might need. If this is not, maybe we can follow up on this question. I'm not sure if you touched a bit about it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understand well the question.
I'll read it out fully. I'm trying to summarize them because they tend to like clump three at once. But the question is, how do you control or ensure the cleanliness of material source you'll use in your process? And what is the regulations you or material suppliers need to follow? So I guess what regulations do these companies follow in order to be, this B Corp certified?
So in terms of B Corps, there is the official website where you can check the level of sustainability they have. There is a chart where they have to respect a few things, obviously. So it's not just any company that has to be that signs up to become a B corporation. They really have to follow some rules and respect them fully. But I can put the link in the chat to for you guys to see if like which company you want to see if they're B corporations or not. And definitely there is a list, and that's how you know if they're sustainable or not in terms of cleanliness and etc.
I think that's a great idea. And this way, before we go shopping online, let's say, we can also check if it's something you really want to purchase. So the next question is if there's any way to collect and recycle good cotton and wools. The question relates to somebody used to collect it around their neighborhood. So is there any collections in Montreal that you know of besides just, donation of clothes that will take the good cottons and wools to be able to be recycled?
In Montreal, not particularly, but there's the council, if I'm not mistaken, is the Council for Textile Recycling. This is a nonprofit, and I think it'd be worth to check it out and see if there are alternatives there. In Montreal, I know more about places that you can donate the clothes already made. These can be a nonprofit called Mission Bon Accueil or Welcome Home Mission. There's also Village de Valeur and Share the Warmth. They have a boutique, so you can donate your clothes there and they will be sold at the boutique. And there's also actually, I don't want to give you wrong information. Go to the Council for Textile Recycling. That will be your best bet. And I believe they do have an interactive map. So you should be able to find it there.
Great. Maybe we can also put the link in the chat at some point. So the next question is, what do you do with the microfibers that you collect from washing your clothes using the gummy friend thing or the coral ball? What do you do with the microfibers collected from those?
Unfortunately, you have no choice but to throw it away, but it doesn't enter the ocean, so it's an alternative, but for sure you have no choice to throw it away. You can't do much with it.
That's exactly what Adriana said, who's also part of our CP3 team. And then she said that maybe CP3 can start recycling it, which I'm not opposed to. That would also be a great source of plastic that we can start collecting in the future. Okay, lots of people saying thank you, and then it was very informative, which I completely agree on.
I like the comments about the plastic alternatives like cactus leathers or clothes made out of fungi. This is a whole topic on its own. Actually, Maeva and we considered including this here, but we realized biomaterials would be its own category. So when we send you a feedback form, we do welcome you to put this if you're interested, and we will be happy to make a second part of plastics in fashion where we focus primarily on, organic leather, kombucha leather, mushrooms, bags. There's many companies doing amazing work in that field.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would be totally interested to elaborate on that as well. And especially if you guys want to know more about organic fabrics too, I can totally talk about that too. Just put in any ideas you want to see in the feedback form, and we would be glad to address them.
There was a question about when will the use of microfibers in detergents and etc. be banned because it kills wildlife. So I think that was a bit of a misunderstanding because there aren't microfibers being used in detergents. The microfibers are what comes when you're washing. The fiber from your clothes will then be expelled into the washing cycle. I we can't say when it will be built, but we're definitely on the team for banning it. And part of what we want to do at CP3 is that we want to recycle Concordia's plastic waste, starting with PLA, and turn it into new items. So we welcome anyone that have ideas into things that can be done with plastics in fashion to check the links that Sarah put and join our teams, and we can start projects that push for this change.
And I also wanted to rectify in terms of the detergent. I was actually referring to like the bottle itself, since oftentimes we throw it away instead of reusing it. So yeah, in terms of microfibers, it's mostly through the washing of synthetic fiber clothing and not the actual detergent itself. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, there's plenty of questions coming in. There's another one. Are the recycling processes clean or dirty? I'm assuming that she means in terms of like when we're recycling the clothing to be something new, or even if you're recycling PET to become a fiber, is it clean or dirty?
The PT has to be washed. So part of what we showed here in the process, and this is very, very similar to what we want to do at CP3, where we want to recycle the plastics. It does have to be washed first, but what these machines here. So first they'll get the bottle, it will be cleaned, it will be sorted, it will be shredded, and then it goes through the extrusion process that we showed in the videos. About the recycling process of garments itself, it's in my understanding that those will also be washed. So
perfect. So I think I have one last question that I think I will ask, and then maybe if there's anybody else that has other questions, you can put it in the chat. My question is, what is your personal experience with this? How did you come about learning about plastics and fashion outside of this webinar? I know both of you personally, and you definitely have spoken about it in the past. So what kind of made you realize that this is kind of important in this industry and should be spoken about?
do you want to start, Maeva?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a huge lover of fashion and I love doing research on fashion. And it was really through discovering linen as like an organic fabric. And it's kind of like through this that I've learned, oh, okay, but what are the actual impacts of fashion itself? Like, are all fabrics actually really clean? And like through researching, I realized, oh, okay, yeah, as consumers, we don't know much about what's going on behind doors. So to me, the fact that like not everyone knows about it, I feel like it's really good to address this situation since lots of people are huge fashion lovers. So I thought it was a good idea to educate on the matter. And I'm a huge organic fabric fan. So yeah, that's how it's all started, basically.
For me, yeah.
Oh, no, go on, go on.
No, finish your thought, Maeva. It's
Oh,
okay.
no, go ahead. It's fine, I'm done.
I guess for me, well, I used to model when I was younger in Brazil. So I was a bit in the part of the Brazilian fashion industry for about a year and a half. And I didn't really enjoy the things that I would learn more about fashion. And I guess it always stayed with me. Like I always like to, watch a fashion week here and there or see what are the news in materials. And when I moved to Montreal, I became very interested in learning more about the future of fashion. There are amazing professors in the Concordia Design Department who do and share their research. And yeah, I started looking into 3D printed fashion and 3D printing earrings and thinking how unsustainable this is. And then I found CP3. So I'm very happy that we're trying to tackle the plastic problem within the scope that we can. To tie it in with the question from Jara Landion in the chat, it's the situation in the supermarkets are very similar to the situations around the world where we have plastics being unnecessarily used for almost all products now, right? And since we can control the supply of these products from the source, the best thing that we can do is we can choose to shop wisely. So I also wish that there weren't microplastics or plastics being used in the supermarket, but unfortunately the best we can do is not consume.
Awesome. So I don't see any more questions. I apologize if you did ask a question and I didn't see it, but I'm going to post our email. If you have other questions, you can always reach us through that or our social media platforms. I'm sure we're going to stay on a little bit longer if there is questions that you guys have. But we'd like to thank everyone for coming and participating. And thank you both to Maeva and Wanda for the very informative session as well.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.